In the dead of night, when most of Wagadugu slept under the heavy silence of the Sahel sky, whispers began to spread through the narrow streets. Shadows moved quickly, silently, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Rumors had already been swirling for weeks. Powerful forces wanted Captain Ibrahim Traoré out of power. But this night, something was different. This was not just talk. Something was about to happen. Inside the presidential residence, Traoré was awake. He rarely slept more than a few hours. His close advisors often said he had the instincts of a soldier who never left the battlefield. On his desk, the dim light of a single lamp illuminated scattered reports. Intelligence briefings warning of plots, messages from loyal officers urging caution, and notes about foreign interference. He leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp, waiting. Then it began. The sound of boots against gravel, the low growl of armored vehicles approaching in the dark. A convoy moved slowly, deliberately, toward the gates. This was no ordinary patrol. This was an operation to arrest the very man who had risen as a symbol of defiance, the youngest leader in Africa. The man who had promised to break free from the chains of foreign control. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had been targeted before. He knew betrayal could come from anywhere, from generals who once swore loyalty, from foreign agents hidden in the crowd, from politicians who smiled in daylight but schemed in darkness. Yet this time the attempt was bolder. They were coming directly for him. His aide-de-camp rushed in. "Captain, we have movement at the gates. Armed men, heavily armed." Traoré did not flinch. He stood, adjusted his military cap, and said quietly, "Let them come." The city's electricity flickered. For a brief moment, Wagadugu was plunged into darkness. Many residents, half asleep, woke up confused by the sudden blackout. But for those moving toward the presidential compound, it was the perfect cover. The soldiers leading the mission thought victory would be simple. After all, he was just one man, surrounded by a small guard. They believed they could storm the residence, capture him, and declare to the world that Traoré's reign was over. But they underestimated one thing: the spirit of a people who had placed their hopes in him. As the first armored truck reached the compound, gunfire erupted, not from Traoré's side, but from hidden rooftops nearby. Loyalist forces had been waiting, positioned strategically across the neighborhood. They knew this night was coming. They had prepared. A sudden explosion rocked the convoy. Flames lit up the sky. Screams echoed through the street. Panic spread among the attackers. What was supposed to be a swift arrest had turned into chaos. Inside the residence, Traoré grabbed a radio. "Brothers, stand your ground. Tonight they will learn Burkina Faso is not for sale." His voice, steady and commanding, was broadcast to units across the capital. Soldiers who were on the fence, unsure of where their loyalty stood, suddenly rallied. Checkpoints that had been neutral lit up with the sound of gunfire as soldiers declared their allegiance. Within minutes, the attempted arrest turned into open confrontation across the city. But this was not just a battle of bullets. This was psychological warfare. The conspirators had counted on fear, on confusion, on the possibility that Traoré's men would abandon him. Instead, the opposite happened. Ordinary citizens poured into the streets, men, women, even teenagers, shouting his name, waving Burkinabé flags, blocking roads to prevent the conspirators from advancing. The people themselves became a shield. At dawn, when the dust settled, the attackers were either captured or had fled into hiding. Those who had betrayed their own leader were paraded before cameras, their faces pale, their arrogance broken. And Traoré? He appeared before the nation, not in fear, not in retreat, but with a calmness that shocked even his enemies. Standing tall, his fatigues dusty from the night's events, he addressed his people. "They tried to silence us. They tried to remove me as they have done to others before. But what they forget is that this struggle is not about one man. It is about Burkina Faso. It is about Africa. And no one can arrest a people who have decided to be free. The crowd roared. His words spread like wildfire across Africa. Social media exploded with footage of citizens cheering, soldiers saluting, and Traoré walking among his people without fear. In an age when many leaders hide behind walls and bodyguards, he stood in the open, shaking hands, embracing the very citizens who had defended him. And yet, the shock was not only in Burkina Faso. In distant capitals, Paris, Washington, and others, politicians and intelligence officers watched the events unfold on their screens in disbelief. They had been certain that Traoré's fall was inevitable, but the resilience of both the leader and his people forced them to reconsider. Who was this young captain who defied the old order? Who was this man who, at just 35, carried the weight of an entire nation's hopes? And why did every attempt to weaken him only make him stronger? The answer was simple, yet powerful. Traoré represented something dangerous to the global powers, an idea. The idea that Africa could stand on its own, could control its own resources, could reject exploitation disguised as partnership. Arresting him was not just about removing a man, it was about crushing a movement. But on that night, the opposite happened. The movement grew. Days later, across Africa, murals of Traoré began to appear. In Mali, in Niger, in Ghana, his face became a symbol of resistance. Youth groups sang his name, protesters carried his image, and the story of the failed arrest became legend, retold in markets, in classrooms, in songs. But the most shocking part was not that he survived, it was that he grew stronger. Intelligence sources revealed that some of the very soldiers sent to arrest him had, after the failed attempt, sworn loyalty to him instead. They had seen with their own eyes that he was not just protected by men, but by a people unwilling to kneel. And so the question echoed far beyond Burkina Faso. If they cannot arrest him, if they cannot silence him, what will they try next? The world watched, waiting. But one thing had become clear. Ibrahim Traoré was no ordinary leader. He was a storm that could not be contained, a fire that grew brighter every time someone tried to extinguish it. And that night, when they tried to arrest him again, what happened did not just shock Burkina Faso, it shocked the world. The words ignited the crowd like a spark to dry grass. Chants filled the air, drums beat in the streets, and for hours, Wagadugu was alive with celebration. But the shock was not just in Burkina Faso. Across Africa, the story spread instantly. Videos of citizens protecting Traoré, of soldiers rallying to him, of captured conspirators being exposed, went viral. In Mali, Niger, Ghana, and beyond, young people painted his face on walls, sang songs in his honor, carried flags with his name. He became more than a president. He became a symbol of defiance. And in the distant offices of foreign powers, the shock was even greater. Intelligence agencies who had predicted his fall now scrambled to explain how he had survived. Politicians who had counted on his arrest watched in disbelief as his popularity soared. What was meant to be the end of his rule had only made him stronger. Perhaps the most shocking revelation came later, when it was discovered that some of the very soldiers sent to arrest him had switched sides during the battle. Witnessing the loyalty of the people, feeling the pull of his words, they refused to carry out their orders. Some even turned their weapons against the conspirators. It was as if destiny itself had intervened. For weeks afterward, the story was told and retold. In markets, elders told it like a legend. In schools, children acted it out in plays. On social media, clips of the night gained millions of views. The message was clear. Ibrahim Traoré was not just a leader. He was an idea, and ideas cannot be arrested. But beneath the celebrations, a question lingered. If they had tried once, if they had tried again, what would stop them from trying once more? The world watched with bated breath. His enemies were still out there, powerful and determined. Yet one thing was undeniable. Every attempt to break him only made him stronger. And so the legend of that night grew. The night when armored trucks rolled in the dark. The night when betrayal met resistance. The night when the youngest leader in Africa stood unshaken against the storm. They tried to arrest Captain Ibrahim Traoré again. But what happened that night did not just shock his enemies, it shocked the entire world.